Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. This is Wednesday, March the 5th. We're live right here in the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're on the radio at 987radio.com. We're at 90. I say that all the time. We're at 98.7 Walk by Faith, 1420 AM, and then 987radio.com on the internet. That's where we are. And we're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and X tonight. Hope you guys had a great day. I got a bummer piece of news last night. Super disappointed. One of the best human beings I've ever met in my entire life. Guy I took care of in Littlefield for I don't know exactly the start date, 10 or 15 years. I took care of him. Passed away yesterday. Had a heart attack of all things, or a stroke. We're not 100% sure. They're going to do an autopsy. His name is Brian Goss. He's in Littlefield. Just a salt of the earth guy. Honestly, one of the best human beings I've ever met. Just a really, really good guy. Would do anything for you. Love the Lord. Has a great family. Is going to be missed. Is just going to be extremely missed. And you know that it's all, every time you have a patient that passes away, it just makes you want to do better. It makes you want to it makes you want to have a better product. It makes you want to try harder to make sure that all the people that you have an opportunity to take care of are listening to this. And I sure don't want to make this about me. It just is what you get when you take care of people and you invest in people and you really do want them to do well. It's like, look, this wellness thing has multiple facets to it. It's not just about getting adjusted. It is partly about getting adjusted because we've talked about that. We talked about it last night. We're going to talk about it a little bit more tonight when we talked about the autonomic nervous system last night. And if you missed that show, please go back and watch it. It was a really good show that we had for you last night. And but so your nervous system, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. We got lots of different things on the schedule for tonight, but your nervous system is just part of it. But it's eat well, move well, think well, right? It's you got to get your exercise. You got to watch out with your diet. You can't let your cholesterol and all that stuff get high. And I know there's a lot of talk these days about cholesterol, but if your cholesterol is high, it's because your diet is wrong. Like, you don't have high cholesterol with a perfect diet or a good diet. It doesn't happen that way. Like, if it does, it's like 1 in a million or something like that. The sales pitch from that is that from the pharmaceutical industry is that it's not your fault, it's your grandpa's fault or dad's fault or whatever, right? It's genetic. And they say, well, it's just genetic. That's why my cholesterol is high. Maybe in a couple of people that's true, but for the rest of us, it goes back to what the quote we read yesterday from Dr. Lipton about how our body's going to conserve. And he's the one that taught me about the whole, the epigenetics, the environment upon the genetics. So, it's an indicator. And I missed some indicators, I guess. I adjusted Brian a week ago yesterday, and he was tired, but he just moved. And he'd moved from, they sold their house and moved into Littlefield. He built himself a shop. He had a bunch of tools and stuff in the shop. And so he said he was tired from moving all those tools and doing all that work. But he was still his same self. He was still he's joking around in the office and talking to people. And I took his tiredness for being, just a part of moving all that stuff. And he was 68 years old. And so I was like, well, maybe he just is, he's kind of worn down from all the move. And apparently it was more than that. And it just goes to show us, right? It's like, he was perfectly healthy last Tuesday, and then this Tuesday he died. And it's like, no, he was not. He was not perfectly healthy last Tuesday. And we just should use these opportunities. We just use these opportunities to try to learn from it and see if we could do the best we can to understand it's not just one part of it. It's not just about exercising and then just eating whatever crap you want to eat. It's it's the whole picture. It's all the parts. It's eating right, it's moving right, it's thinking right, it's getting your sleep, it's saying your prayers. Brian was like, there's no question he's in Jesus. He's up there with Jesus today, and he's sitting next to his mom, and I took care of her for a long time too. She passed away in the last couple of years. Just a great family, good people, great family. I'm so blessed to have spent some time with him over the last 10, 15 years, however long I've known him. I tried to look it up today, but we switched some software back that long ago, and I can't find exact. When I get to Littlefield on Tuesday, I'll look at his paperwork and see exactly when I started with him. But learned a lot from him, and was blessed to know him. So I'm going to miss him. So what do we do with all that, right? Because it's March, and we've been talking about trying to get well. And this is, we really need to pay attention to these things, right? We need to say, okay, what can we do to start getting well? It's a beautiful day in Lubbock, Texas today. All that wind is gone, I guess, pretty much in the whole nation. I saw a post yesterday, and they talked about how the West Texas wind covered Fort Worth. My son even said that. He's like, man, I said, you should have seen the dust that we're dealing with yesterday. And he said, you should have seen the dust that we were dealing with. All that dust blew to Fort Worth, I guess. So I think pretty much from the North Pole all the way down through this, we all dealt with it. But today was beautiful, all right? So what can we do? Let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about some things. Let's look at what we saw last night just for a second, and just finish this thought to show you this anatomy trains. And if you guys are on the radio and you want to go to the Walk by Faith page, and you can Walk by Faith Facebook page. I'm sure they're sharing that by now, and so you can get some of this information. Otherwise, you just have to just listen to us as we're talking about it, right? But fascia is, if you've ever had a steak, and there's like you cut through a steak, and there's that like white piece of tissue, and it separates. What fascia basically does is it separates muscle fibers so they don't stick together, especially bigger like muscle groups, so that they can kind of move in different directions. It helps kind of create some support for our body, connects our body from top to bottom. But this is a great picture of what we were talking about yesterday, how you can have fascia that runs from the bottom of your foot all the way up through your calf, all the way up through your hamstring, and then right through your pelvis, all the way up your back and to the top of your head, and come right over the top of your head to right above your eyes. And that's just one picture that I showed you yesterday, but it runs all the way to you. There's a fascial plane that runs all the way from the side of your foot up the side of your leg, crosses over in your knee, runs right up your thigh on the outside of your leg, and then crosses through underneath your ribs and back up to your neck. And then you've got some of this fascia that actually starts on the inside of the foot and then crosses to the outside of the knee, up to the hip, then crosses back across the torso, wraps itself around coming from the backside, and comes up back across and attaches to the base of the skull. So this fascia is really, really interesting when you study it. And you look at all these different kinds of fascial planes. Did you just look at this one? This is the one kind of what we were talking about yesterday that attaches to the hand, up through the forearm, from the elbow up to the shoulder, across the pec, and covers that whole pec muscle. Same thing with it coming from the thumb up to the bicep down to the pec minor area. That's all kind of fits together. You can look at it on the back of the arm, from the back of the hand up to the elbow, up to the deltoid on the shoulder, and then get involved in this whole trap, rhomboid, levator scapula area, all of your back right there. And so these connection points cross muscles, and that's kind of what the anatomy trains does a super great job of explaining. It's like, look, you may have a muscle that's a bicep running from your, from basically your shoulder to your elbow, and then you may have another muscle running from your elbow to your wrist, but you may have a piece of fascia that covers all of that and then comes across onto your chest, and you feel that all the way around. So this is one of the things that people really don't understand about a good massage therapist. Like if you have a good massage therapist, one of my patients went to Arasti this last week because she was really hurting, and she wanted a second opinion. She got it. She actually went to the most perfect place she could have gone to, instead of going and getting some sort of injection in her neck or something like that. But she ended up in an Arasti office, and they did some soft tissue work, and they worked on these fascial planes, and she got some relief, and then she came back, got adjusted today, and we continued with her care. But if you ever get a good massage therapist, and there's good massage therapists and there's not good massage therapists, just like chiropractors or lawyers or school teachers or football coaches, right? There's all kinds of different ones. But if you get a good massage therapist and they kind of understand these fascial planes, you can keep this nice and healthy. And that's the point I want to make. It's like, look, we've got there's multiple layers to health, and we're trying to stay as healthy as possible. But if you see these pictures, maybe you might be able to see them and say, oh, like I get that now. Like that's, I can see now where if my pec muscle was really tight, how it might affect not just my pec, but my entire shoulder, bicep, forearm, wrist. Like that whole thing together. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? And how does that work? Well, remember that the way that your brain fires, and I know we're getting it's a little bit technical tonight, but just remember that if we were to draw your vertebrae and your sacrum at the bottom and your right side and your left side, and then we put this big giant brain on there, right? So this frontal lobe, if you break that upper brain into two different parts, you got a frontal and parietal lobe right there. If you got those two, one of the jobs of the frontal lobe is to inhibit flexor muscles. Turn them off. Turn your flexor muscles off. Your brain, and it's what we call ipsilateral. It's on the same side. Most of motor control in your, let's say that this is right and this is left. Most of the left side motor control is done by the brain on the right side. But there's a small portion of the brain that stays on the same side that is responsible for inhibiting or turning off the flexor muscles. And what are flexor muscles? The flexor muscles are these, what I'm just showing you on that picture right there in the anatomy trains. This is a great picture of flexor muscles on the front of the body. So the pec muscle coming into the bicep muscle, coming into the forearm muscle. And this is a pec minor into the bicep, into the thumb. So this anterior part, the front part of your body is under the control of your brain in relaxation. And I always think about it as like, I always think about it as reins on a horse. So like when I was growing up and we learned how to ride, you kept like a certain amount of tension on the reins. Now, we didn't do any sort of fancy, cutting horse stuff or any of that stuff. We just did some regular riding stuff. But you kept a certain amount of tension on the rein because you wanted to have a certain amount of control, if that's an illusion or not. But you just had like a little bit of just a little bit of tension on that rein. So if you wanted to stop, you could pull back and you could stop, right? You didn't want to, if you had these big long reins, you didn't want to just get off all the way down on the end of the rein. So then when all of a sudden you had to stop, you had to just like pull way, way back before you got any slack on it. Like you got to take the slack out of it and keep it relatively tight, not too tight, but just a little bit of tight, so that whenever you're ready to pull back and stop, then you can pull back and stop, right? Well, this muscle contraction is controlled by the way that your brain is working. And so if your brain starts to get dampened, if it loses charge, then what happens is these muscles, they start to get tight. And then they start to change your posture. They start to change your ability to sit up. I'm telling you, one of the things that is so hard to get people to understand is it's such a hard thing to get them to understand flexion. I know you guys get it because you've seen this show lots of times, but flexion in the lumbar spine is so misunderstood, and it does so much damage to the disc, and it causes so much trouble to the disc in low back pain because people spend so much of their time slouched forward, especially slouched forward in their belly area, in your lumbar spine, in your low back. And when you try to get people to roll their hips forward, they have a really hard time rolling their hips. They've lost that movement. They don't even understand what that means to roll their hips forward. Like, as gross as this sounds, what I have them do is I have them sit on the edge of the table and then open their feet just a little bit. And I tell them, I said, look, I want you to try to pretend like you're going to pee under the table. Sorry. I know it's kind of gross, but it's like roll your hips. So really roll your hips forward and then leave your hips in that position and bring your shoulders back. That right there is getting a lot of people into normal lumbar positioning because what they normally do is slouch forward. You might just check yourself right now. Like wherever you are, if you're standing or sitting, are you slouching forward? Yeah. Well, the dynamics of that forward slouch is putting pressure on that disc and causing that disc to work itself backwards where the nerves are, which ends up with the pain that runs down your leg or across your thigh. How many people have that pain runs right across the top of their thigh or down there underneath their knee on the inside or on the outside of your knee from your knee to your ankle? You get that pain that runs down there or this pain that runs right across the thigh. And that so many times that's lumbar spine flexion instead of being in a nice, proper position in the lumbar spine. Well, what is one of the things that controls these flexors above the waist? The frontal lobe, right? The connection of the brain with what's going on in the fascia and the muscles. And then what happens is that stuff starts to really get tight. And then you have a really hard time getting yourself back up into those proper positions because you're in that flexion. And I don't know what, I'm obviously losing the battle on that because it's really, really hard to get people to understand that. You got to roll those hips. You got to get yourself up. You got to get in. You got to get off of that flexion in that lumbar spine, right? So let's get back to the upper part of the body, and let's look at these flexor muscles that are in the arm and shoulder, right? So the pec muscle, pec minor muscle, bicep through the inside, down the forearm, into the hand, right? That whole thing together, think about this forward head posture, internal rolled shoulders, hands bent. That posture right there. And you might have yourself in that posture. Might be in that forward head posture and you're rolled over, right? Okay. What is it indicating? It's indicating a couple different things. It's indicating, number one, it's indicating abnormal input into the brain. That's number one. Abnormal input. Because of this forward head posture, rolled shoulders, flexion of the abs, this posture that we sit in like that, just by itself changes this input that's going into the brain. Let's see if I can change the color. Yeah. So now we're altering this input right here. So the input, so now the brain's trying to make a decision because the brain is an input organ. Your brain is trying to set your body into balance, but your brain is not receiving the proper information, and it's causing the brain to have to work harder. And what do we know about the way that the brain works, right? The brain works on the right side, then it goes to the left side. So this abnormal input makes the brain work harder. So let me show you. I'll see if you can get this right here. See what this looks like. I hadn't had a chance to see it yet. Yeah. So this is a copy of what's called Y-Files. And this is really awesome. This is some stuff that we had since chiropractic school, and it is it's a PowerPoint presentation that a guy named Dr. D'Onofrio, he was the head of the neurology board at one point or another. He was a really great teacher. He's passed away, but he would teach us some really cool stuff in Y-Files, and you could go, he'd have like a seminar while we were in chiropractic school, and he'd teach us some good stuff. And it talks about these few slides. I'm going to show you a couple different ones right here, but these few slides that I'm looking at is, number one, why people get sick. And the number one thing on the list right here is brain imbalance, right? It's brain imbalance. Then we get into toxicities and deficiencies when we don't have enough vitamins and minerals and lack of exercise, different things like that, right? But brain imbalance is one of the things that causes people to get sick. And it's the stress, and it calls it the silent assassin of health. Stress fires the sympathetic nervous system, and that's what our slide was showing us earlier, is that it fires it the up and to the right part of the input problem. If you don't get that up and over to the left, then it gets stuck in the right, and now you're driving that right hemisphere, and now all of a sudden you're increasing your anxiety, you're increasing your stress response. One of my girls was in Dallas with the cheerleading competition, and where they had the stampede, this gunshot and all that sort of thing. And she's pretty convinced that there was a gunshot that was there. Everybody says it wasn't, but she's like, I was there, and I know what a gunshot is. And she does know what a gunshot is because her daddy owns a big ranch, and she's heard lots of gunshots in her life. And she's like, I know what a gunshot sounds like, and that was a gunshot. So I don't know, I wasn't there. But what she told me was, I was fine in the moment, but since I got back, I've had some moments where I've been really stressed out. And she's like, on the way over to get adjusted this morning, a police officer pulled somebody over close to her, and she saw the lights and all that sort of thing. And she kind of had like a little bit of a stress response, like a post-traumatic stress issue that went on. And it fires that sympathetic nervous system, right? That right side that we've talked about lots of times is the firing of the right side of the brain, where that amygdala is. So that amygdala is down here in this lower right side, and this input into the thalamus and then over to the amygdala starts the stress response. Then the signal gets up to the cortex, and then the cortex comes down and shuts off the stress response and then sends it over to the left. It's so vital right there. Like this whole thing is, if you like, you take the article we broke down last night, and you take the article that we broke down on Friday, and you say, okay, if I have lack of neck movement, then it fires my brain in a way that increases my sympathetic output, my fight or flight response. Well, last night what we talked about is that autonomic imbalance precedes critical illness, right? Like my man yesterday, there was some sort of autonomic imbalance that was preceding that critical illness right there. In my lady's particular case today, it's this stress response that's shutting off this upper brain from being able to stop it. So now what do we get? We get too much activity in that right hemisphere. I know it's complicated tonight, but stick with me. Because too much complication of the right hemisphere is exactly this. Stress fires the sympathetic nervous system. This releases neurotransmitters, epinephrine and norepinephrine. This has greater effect on the right cortex, which is the emotional, worrisome side of the brain. This causes more stress and anxiety, right? Now we get more stress and anxiety. We get more cortisol released, and we got to take a break. So I hit it tonight. Again, I didn't get surprised by that. But you guys stick around with us. When we get back, we'll just keep talking about health. So this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, on this Wednesday, March the 5th. We'll be right back. Okay, so what are we saying by all this tonight? Right? What we're saying is it's time for us to be healthy. This is the season, right? We're in season right now with health. And there's a connection between the biomechanics of the body and the autonomic nervous system of the body. And the autonomic nervous system in balance is going to lead us down a road of bad health. We really, really need to make sure that we can keep our autonomic nervous system balanced so that we don't end up being sick. And it's not just the food. It is partly the food. You can get adjusted every week and you can still die of a heart attack. It's not just about the adjustment. It's about the diet and the exercise and the spinal biomechanics all working together. And the better we diet and the better we exercise, the better our spinal biomechanics are. Like that is one of the things that keeps us healthy and keeps our brain working, is not filling our bodies with omega-6s that inflame this fascia and all of the connective tissue everywhere inside of our body, and get it all inflamed and and simultaneously fire up our immune system to have this overreactive immune response. It's like the whole thing. I'll show you just while we're on the break right here, but this is where he starts. TH2, TH1 versus TH2 response, right? We talked about that last week. And what happens when we get that TH1 to TH2 shift? And it's like we don't want that. Like allergies. It says many researchers regard allergy as a TH2 weighted imbalance. And recently, immunologists have been investigating ways to redirect allergic TH2 responses in favor of a TH1 response to try to reduce the incidence of allergies. Right? Yeah. Well, what influences that? Well, one of the things that influences is our spinal biomechanics and movement. Hang on, let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and we're talking about health tonight, and we're talking about the relationship between the way your body moves and the way that your autonomic nervous system works, so that we can kind of see what we've talked about over the last couple of nights about how, look, this stress fires a certain pathway in our nervous system. And if we want to be healthy, we've got to control the way that this pathway is firing. So we get this release of neurotransmitters that has a greater effect on the right side, the right cortex, which is emotionally worrisome side of the brain, and causes more stress and anxiety. And then we get the firing off of the adrenal cortex, the adrenal glands, right? Because once that amygdala fires, it fires down to the adrenal gland to release cortisol. And cortisol, in turn, drives the right cortex, creating more emotion, more worry, and more anxiety. And what do I say all the time? The longer you stay in your right hemisphere, the more you go from curious to fear to psycho. And I've said that to two people this week, and both of them are like, I'm not psycho. I said, I'm not calling you psycho. I'm saying when you're unknown about something, the unknown drives the adrenal glands releases the cortisol drives the right hemisphere. We get this loop, and then we go from curious about how this is going to work out to fearful about how this is going to work out to, oh my gosh, really far down the road. And the further we go down the road, the more physiological events we have, the more chances we have of disrupting our entire body, right? Cortisol will also regulate thyroid stimulating hormone receptors on the thyroid that will slow down the thyroid and lead to thyroid problems. How many people have hypothyroidism? You're cold all the time, you don't have any energy, you carry too much weight, you have a hard time losing weight. Those are all signs of hypothyroid function. And you don't have enough thyroid. Well, cortisol will downregulate that thyroid hormone. The sluggish thyroid will then have a greater effect on the left cortex, causing feelings of sadness, lack of motivation, and a decreased immune system. That's a big one right there, the decreased immune system. The left hemisphere has more activity in relationship to the immune system than the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is the one that's working on the threats, right? And we said that last night, that you don't need an immune system if you're in the middle of a tiger fight. So the right hemisphere really is not that concerned with the immune system. The left hemisphere is where we get that immune function. So a sluggish thyroid would then have greater effect on the left cortex, causing feelings of sadness, lack of motivation. Lack of motivation. What is lack of motivation? It's decreased dopamine. You see how this whole thing, see how it all fits? It's so awesome. It's so awesome when you study it and you really start to get it. And this is like old stuff. Like I think this, I don't even know. Like I think MJ and Katie might have sent me this Y-Files. This is 2015. Yeah, so this was their version of Y-Files from when they were in chiropractic school, sometime around that time. Of something that they either got it from Dr. D'Onofrio. I'm pretty sure they did from Dr. Yeah, they did, because there's some slides at the bottom. But so look at it. Look at it right here. Right hemisphere activation without left hemisphere activation, causing increased levels of anxiety over here, increased stress response, increased adrenal function, because now we're going to fire down to the adrenal glands. So we get an increased adrenal function, which equals increased cortisol, right? Which also, the cortisol will shut off the cerebellum, So the cortisol now is turning off the cerebellum. And what is the cerebellum responsible for? It's responsible for all the intrinsic muscle tone, balance, and coordination. So now we have a harder time sitting up. Now we want to slouch. Like now our head goes forward. Now our stomach bends forward. Our abs come forward, and we're in this slouching posture instead of rolling our hips forward and going into extension. So it's like this whole thing is fitting together. Well, now what Dr. D'Onofrio is saying is that the sluggish thyroid has a greater effect on the left cortex, causing feelings of sadness. Well, the sadness is you either get an overactivity or an underactivity of that left hemisphere, and then you get lack of motivation. And we already know that lack of motivation is, what is dopamine? It's the neurotransmitter of anticipation, of motivation. It's what keeps you from sitting under a tree and starving to death. Got that line from Dr. Peterson. That's what dopamine does for you, right? But we're not getting that left side firing, so we're getting this lack of motivation, and we're getting decreased immune system function, which are the things that go along with what happens in the midline. We always talk about this. Digestion goes wrong. So now you get acid reflux. Well, when I talked to Brian's wife this morning, I drove to Littlefield after I finished with 9:30. Went over there and saw Brian's wife, and she said, he was having a bunch of that acid reflux. And I was like, that was not mentioned to me. And it's my fault. I should have asked. But it's like, what? He didn't want to eat because he had a lot of acid reflux. What is that saying to me? It's saying to me that we have autonomic imbalance. If you have acid reflux, think about this for a second. If you have acid reflux, which my daughter hates that word, but that's a true word, right? GERD, whatever you want to call it. You have sour stomach for really old people, right? Acid reflux should be the first thing you should think about right there is you should think about brain. But what do? What we say is, man, we better take some Tums or some Rolaids or some Protonics or some Nexium. Makes me sick when I see that commercial and they paint all those roofs purple on that Nexium. We should take something to stop our acid reflux. If we really understood health, we would understand how insulting that is to innate intelligence. Where I'm going to give you a signal that might keep you from dying, and you're going to cover that signal with some sort of medication, some sort of pharmaceutical, so that you don't have to deal with your acid reflux. When your acid reflux doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in your stomach, as far as function goes, it has more to do with what's going on in your brain, right? That's the first one that always shows up is digestion. Like, yeah, I that's one of the things, man, we're just about to get to 25 years right now. Like in another week, we'll be at 25 years. Well, since I went to work for my brother-in-law in chiropractic, and 25 years ago, I said to him, I said, dude, you can take that bucket and stuff it. And when I get a headache, I'm going to take a Tylenol. And when I get acid reflux, I'm going to take a Rolaids. That was was one of the more stupid things I've said in my lifetime, right? That it was like, I've had Rolaids one time in 25 years. That's it. I've had some acid reflux, but I knew it wasn't because of the lack of Rolaids in my bloodstream. And so now it's like, oh, dude, you got to heal that, or you're going to end up with Barrett's esophagus. You're going to end up with a problem in your esophagus if you have all that acid in your esophagus. So you got to do something about that. And so, yes, I haven't had almost a drop. I don't think I've had a drop of acid reflux in the last 3 years because I haven't had any sugar at all. But I also got to keep my feet moving. I also got to get adjusted. I also got to make sure that my brain's functioning right. Right? The second thing that happens with that whole deal is immune system. And it's immune system dysfunction because we're not getting this power to the left hemisphere, and so this whole left side of our brain's not functioning, and so our immune system's not working. And the third one is reproduction. So that whole thing is starting to go. And then the last one, I'll just add it. I wasn't going to go this far, but posture. Now look at posture. Now look at posture with the forward head posture and the rolling of the shoulders. And now think about posture from a mechanoreceptor, proprioceptor, a movement alteration. Now, the movement alteration is now firing back up into the brain, which ends up causing this thing to even turn. Now we're in a vicious circle. We're in this vicious circle of brain causing problems in the body, which cause problems in the brain, which cause problems in the body, which cause problems in the brain. Right? You see how it all goes together? And then the sympathetic nervous system will then shunt blood from the large abdominal veins and arteries that supply the visceral organs to the arteries of the arms and legs in a fight or flight response. This will cause digestive system to malfunction if the stress is prolonged. That's what I was talking about. That's what happens in our digestion. It's like, why is the digestion a problem? Well, if we're in fight or flight and we're pushing all the blood to the outside, then we're not getting enough oxygen to our organs. Maybe we weren't getting enough oxygen to the heart. Maybe that we were having some sort of nerve imbalance to the heart. Maybe we were having a sympathetic, parasympathetic imbalance that created a critical response that creates a heart attack. Right? The epinephrine and norepinephrine of the sympathetic nervous system will break down the glycogen into glucose, and cortisol will start gluconeogenesis, both causing blood sugar to elevate and cause the depletion of B vitamins as well as cofactor minerals. This leads to an overall malfunction of all metabolic systems in the body. Now we're just running crazy with all this, right? And it's like, oh, man, I see it. I see it now. Like, well, since you said that, now we got elevated blood sugar. So what is elevated blood sugar going to bring to the table? Right? So I switched signs on you guys, and you're missing all my drawings over here. But so now when you get all of this going on, and now you get this elevated blood sugar, let's add that one to the whole list. Now you're going to get elevated insulin. And insulin is going to tell you to store your calories as fat, which is also going to create all kinds of fatty liver problems until you get to the point where now the fat cells start to release the cytokines, and then we increase immune system response, and this whole thing, and then there's your type 2 diabetes. It's a mess, right? It's a mess. The whole thing maps. It maps all, it doesn't matter how many different ways you want to look at it. The whole thing maps together, and it goes from one to the next, and it just shows us how this whole thing is all fit together. And then this last slide I want to show you on Dr. D'Onofrio's stuff is mood, gut bacteria, and the immune system. This is published April 6, 2011. So many people would be surprised at the immune system, the gastrointestinal tract, and stress interaction, but that is what the most recent of a number of studies shows is in this one study on mice. Brain behavior and Immunity, Volume 25, Issue 3, March 2011. Researchers demonstrated that psychological stress caused almost immediate changes in the gut bacterial population, and that some of these affected subpopulations strongly influence the effects that stress has on immunity. So now we're getting into our Diego Borrega's um, neuropod cells. And now we're getting the vagus nerve tied into the gut and the microbiome in the gut. So now we're changing the way that the microbiome is, which is now feeding back to the brain, which is now changing our immune system. In the study, researchers exposed mice to social disruption, which is known to cause increased circulating cytokines, the hormones of the immune system, which themselves induce enhanced reactivity in the immune system. Whoa. No. Right? So, this is mental emotional stress. That's basically what that's trying to say, is that now we've got mental emotional stress that's disrupting this gut bacteria, which is changing our immune response, which is also changing our brain, which is also lowering our level of motivation, which is also causing us to eat more omega-6 fatty acids, which causes us to be inflamed in our connective tissue, and our fascia decreases our ability to move, which decreases the input into our brain, which causes this whole stress response to keep going. And then it's a wonder that we it's a wonder we make it this far, right? I just remember studying all this the first time around and just thinking to myself, I told my partner one day, I was like, dude, I just feel like I should just go jump off a bridge. Like, what? Like, this is so depressing. Like, we got no chance, right? We got no chance that this is just going to eat it, that we're going to eat our lunch. And then I was like, huh. And then Dr. Murphy said, no, hang on a second. Just hang on a second. Let me give you some hope. All right? And let me give you some hope too, right? We'll make sure that we get plenty of hope tonight, because we're really getting after it tonight. All right? Let's just take all of this stuff that's going on, and this is what we know will happen when things go bad. If you got anxiety, if you got acid reflux, if you got some sort of postural issue, any of those things, right? Your testosterone's low, your immune system's not functioning, you're sad, depressed, all of it. Like, all this stuff is happening. All right, what do we do to solve this problem? What do we do? All right, we move our feet. We could just erase all of it right there. We move our feet. We get on our feet and we move our feet. And what does that do for us? It gets enough information going to the right hemisphere that we can get enough information going to the left hemisphere. So now these can talk to each other going back and forth. The right hemisphere has more to do with the limbic system and what's going on top to bottom. The left hemisphere has a little bit more to do with front to back, but it's okay. So we got this whole thing going on, and now we're moving and we're motivated, because now we have motivation, because we're getting some dopamine over here. We're getting some dopamine from moving. So we get on our feet and we start walking and we start moving. And that's going to start the process now. That's going to overcome some of this negative emotion. It's going to overcome some of this lack of motivating factor. Just get to moving. And why is it about March that I'm so excited? Is because we got sunshine. We can get outside and we can start walking. And when we get outside and we start walking, we're going to start moving our feet. We're going to start giving our brain some of the energy that it needs. And as the brain starts to get the energy that it needs, it will gain the motivation to want to be better. It'll give us a reason to go want to be better. And then now we will start to understand, I think I can actually do this. Like, I think I can do this now. And so now what am I going to do? I'm going to start to eat well. Because as soon as you start to realize, man, I got a chance, then it's like, all right, now what do I need to do? I need to eat well. I need to make sure that I get the nutrients. What was the first slide? Dr. D'Onofrio said, how did this first thing start? He's like, how do we get sick? Deficiencies. That's the first thing I learned that in chiropractic school. There's only two reasons. You have too much or too little of something. That's what sickness is. It's too much or too little of something. Well, deficiencies, toxicities is too much of something, and deficiencies is not enough of something. And so if we don't have enough nutrients inside the body, then we start to get sick. So now it's like, hey, I need to eat well. And what if I can't get all the nutrients I need from eating well? Then the next thing I got to do is supplement. Right? I got to supplement. If I can't get all the nutrients from the foods that I have, then I need to supplement. And that's why the supplements become super important. Because now it's like, hey, I got to get this deficiency issue settled. I got to get my body the nutrients that it needs. And then tomorrow night we'll talk about it, because I've got a slide that I put together. And tomorrow night we'll go list by list of all the supplements that I think are recommended. But we know the ones, you guys know. It's like, well, one of the things that we just talked about tonight is B vitamins. Like, you guys know omegas is going to be first. And then magnesium. And I'm not going to go all of them, but I do want to go to B vitamins. Right? And so because our stress response is depleting our B vitamins, that would be a great idea to make sure that we get our B vitamins back inside the body. And then we can start to move better. And then all of a sudden we're eating well. And it's like, hey, we already started to think well. So we got the eat well part. Now we're starting to think well. And what started this whole thing is we moved well. And it's like, wow. And then those cells, all of a sudden you put those cells in that environment, that eat well, move well, think well, Dr. Chestnut environment, right? You put those cells in that environment, and now all of a sudden it's like those cells start to express health. Or they inhibit lack of health. Two things happening at the same time. Not only are you expressing health, but you're keeping the lack of health at bay. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You can do this at any age. And it's vitally important that you do it young, but it's also available to you all the way through. And if our moms would raise our kids this way, like all you moms out there, if you're still raising kids, if you would raise your kids this way, to eat well, move well, and think well, you could eliminate a bunch of their problems in the future. And if they could be healthier, then their kids would be healthier. And then their kids would be healthier. And it's like, wow, it's that simple. It's that simple. Because that cell doesn't know anything but to try to do its very best every single day. That's what the cells are trying to do. So put them in the right environment. Put that seed in the right environment, and you get a beautiful plant. Put that seed on this table, you get nothing. And it all fits together. Your autonomic nervous system, your myofascial planes, your muscle fascial planes, all that stuff fits together with your right hemisphere and your left hemisphere, and what you eat and how you move. and whether or not you're going to get enough sleep. We got to put that, that's a big thing that we got to make sure we're getting some sleep involved in that too. And if we do all that stuff together, our body's going to express health. And if we don't do that, we're in for some trouble along the way, right? So we got 1:03. Let me just check right quick because see if there's Lewis, I hope you're doing good. Isabel says, so much knowledge. Where does one start? Basic beginning until we can get to a DC. Okay, great question. Where do we start? Move your feet. If you can get outside, move your feet. If you can't walk, get you one of those things that moves your feet. I don't know what that thing is called. It looks like a little pedaler. Like you just put your feet on there and start moving your feet. If you get your feet moving, you start to drive your brain, and you start this whole process. That's all I got for you tonight. I hope you guys have a great night. Thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for the comments. I appreciate that. Thanks for the text. And you guys have a great evening. Guys, take care of yourself out there, and be careful. We'll talk to you tomorrow night at 6. Let me know if I can help you.